Every year, as spring starts to stretch her wings across the Alps, the annual migration of the technical skier to the glaciers begins. The glaciers provide a safe spawning ground for the new concepts and ideas to evolve the species. The snow falls, the air thins and the mercury drops, a harsh climate that provides the stage for the technical skier. With the dawn of a new day, skiers from near and far meander their way through the rivers, mountains and gorges. As the groomers finalize the arenas, the technical skier eagerly awaits the opportunities to spread their wings and lay the perfect tracks to impress their peers. Each year they hope to inch closer to their pinnacle and create a legacy that will live on and inspire future generations of elite skiers. This is their legacy.
Hi, my name is Paul Lorenz. I'm a ski instructor from Australia. I started teaching skiing in 2002 in Thredbo. Since then I've worked in America, Canada, Austria and more recently in Japan, where I've directed a ski school in Niseko. I've attended interski with the Australian team at 3 separate interskis, and now I'm here in Hintertux with my friends Riley and Richie to share with you my ideas on skiing. I think the most exciting skiing is when you can tap into the energy that's produced from the slope. So, using your position to align yourself against the force pushing back at you from the snow. I think that force is a lot more powerful than a lot of the muscle and the effort that you can put in, and it creates a very exciting picture. And it seems a bit cheesy, but it almost feels like when somebody does this well, they have like a superpower that pushes them across the slope, as opposed to turning and riding the ski across the slope. And I think that's really exciting to watch, whether it's short turns or long turns. Skiing is one of the few things in life that centers you to be living right now. And I think when you're traveling down the hill and feeling the energy from the snow and that excitement doesn't facilitate any thinking about what's happening tomorrow or yesterday or what's for dinner, or just you're living right now. And there's very few things in life that I think have that effect with me, and if you can find that, I think that's a really important thing for everyone. And skiing is so exciting, and I think that heightened state of living is those little bits of time, that's what makes up a really good life. The other really amazing thing about skiing is that for me it guarantees that feeling of living in the present, regardless of the snow or the weather. I mean, there's definitely better weather than other weather, but the snow definitely, no matter what the snow conditions are, enjoyment can still be had. You know, I think there are a lot of skiers out there that live for one type of condition, like powder or whatever it is. And I think, you know, powder's incredible, but then so is ice, and so is bumps, and so is slush. There's fun to be had in all of those situations if you know how. So that's why I say that skiing can guarantee that, you know, heightened state. Something that's inspired me through my training as a ski instructor was watching a lot of video and obviously competition. The only videos really that were available were coming out of Japan. So there were a lot of the Austrian skiers like Richie and Gugi and Graber, and then a lot of the Japanese skiers as well. Unfortunately, none of it was in English, but it was very inspiring to watch them ski. I used to have a lot of those videos so that I could watch them before I went up skiing each day. And then more recently, as I've been skiing with the Australian team at Interski, that's given me access to meet the top of each country's organisation, and that's been very inspiring. In 2015, I started competing in the Japanese technical competitions, which I think is an incredible level of skiing, and being able to compete in something that up until that point was really only examined as a standard really pushes you, because it's not just about doing things to show a certain movement, it's about doing things technically correct but better than the person before and after you. So that pushes you to go faster and have more performance and, you know, have more deflection and more rhythm and that sort of thing. So every year that's inspiring me to improve my skiing.
It's no matter what, you're going to get
that side, mad side in it. Test, test, test. Is that picking up? Yeah. So short turns to me are one of the more exciting turns because there's a lot happening. I think they're really difficult to do, but they're exciting when you get it right, and they're really exciting to watch as well. I think it's finding the balance of three objectives that determine whether it goes well or not. The three objectives are the rhythm, having a shorter or longer rhythm, the amount of deflection, so more deflection or less, and then the speed you take down the hill. The difficulty is that those three objectives don't line up. So obviously the faster you go down the hill, the more difficult it is to deflect. The more deflection there is, then the longer the rhythm will be. So it's always a bit of a trade-off, and I think to ski the terrain, blending those three to get the best outcome is the best type of short turn in my opinion. So the focus of my short turns have changed a little bit over the last couple of years. Prior to that, I was trying to pure carve my short turns everywhere. That's the race carving or slicing the snow without any deviation off the rail or the edge of the ski. And more recently, I've been trying to get or work on more energy across the hill or deflection. And I've also realised that pure carving or race carving short turns doesn't work on every terrain. So I've been focusing on like a mixed performance turn. So that means I'm still changing edges and trying to go from one edge to the other before the ski turns or twists down the hill. But I now have an option as to whether I continue to slice and pure carve, race carve into the turn, or whether I pull my foot forward through the arc and then lock the ski on the edges or slice or race carve later in the turn. I believe that to really maximise the energy across the hill, at some point in the turn the skis have to slice or race carve. So now just timing or determining where the most efficient part in the turn to get that is something that I'm working on, and will change whether it's steep or flatter or if I'm off-piste or on the groomed. The movements should stay very similar, but the objective might change. So if I am skiing on soft snow in Japan, then I know that it doesn't have the energy in the snow to provide very much deflection. So that means to be exciting, I have to have a faster rhythm, and I might take less deflection down the hill at a faster speed. If it's steeper or firmer or icy, then that snow facilitates a lot of acceleration across the hill in a short turn. So my deflection will be higher or bigger, and the other two will maybe slower in speed, and the rhythm will change as well. So really finding the objective to suit or work the best on the terrain. when I'm trying to perform short turns, I'll start from the top of the turn. The biggest focus for me is to change edges without any direction change of the ski. So going from the uphill edges straight onto the downhill edges, and a lower position or flex in the joints will facilitate that movement coming from the lower leg. Once the ski is on the edge, I'm going to continue to increase the edge angle as my legs extend away from me, so that my hip and centre of mass is further to the inside with a longer leg to then deal with or brace against the energy that pushes back. I'm then trying to time my release of the turn so that the energy pushes me across the hill. That's where the energy comes in, or the acceleration, but also time the relaxing of my outside leg with that energy so that I can then cross into the new turn and maintain a fast rhythm. So the exercises that I want to work on will work on some parts of that turn. Let's first have a look at the skis locking on the edge, because particularly when you turn the ski across the direction of travel and then set the edge or lock the ski on the edge or slice the snow, it's quite an abrupt feeling, and that's something we have to get used to. So we're going to start in a snowplow doing a crab walk. So in a snowplow, I want you to start heading down the hill and roll the ankle, knee and move the hip inside to one side so the ski locks on the edge. And immediately once it starts slicing, you'll feel the snow start to push against the base of the ski. And at that time, that's when you need to stay strong and let it start to push you across the hill. Okay, that's the focus of this exercise. Okay, when you do this, you might play around with what parts of the body you use. You might get a lot of edge angle from the ankle and knee, but find that when the snow pushes back, you're in a weak position. You might find that if you just use the hip and dump that inside to edge, that it might take longer to increase the edge as much as you need. So I think a blending of all three joints is needed so that you can do it quickly and also be able to deal with what pushes back. It's important that when you do this, there's no twisting or turning of either ski. All right, I'm just staying in a snowplow and locking one on so that I'm now pointing in the direction that that ski's facing. And then I take that one off the edge, I put the other one on, and now I start moving the opposite direction. There's no twisting or turning of the skis. So now we've got the point of feeling what it's like to go from the skis skidding to locking and slicing or edging. So I want to enhance that pressure that comes back from the snow with a more extreme crab walk. So I want you to do the same thing, but this time I want you to lift up the ski and firmly put it down on the edge, so you'll feel quite an abrupt sense of pressure or force pushing against the base of the ski. All right? It's important that when you do this, the direction that your ski is facing when you put the ski down will determine how much pressure is felt. So if I put the ski down pointing in the direction I'm traveling, which might be straight down the hill at this point, and then lock it on the edge, nothing much will happen. If I turn it a lot across the hill and put it down on the edge, you might receive so much pressure that you can't deal with it. So it's getting this angle right and then placing it on the edge so that you can maximize that feeling of pressure to push you across the hill. So you can do this to both sides. If you get it right, you should feel a pretty overwhelming feeling of being pushed across the hill, but it's still manageable. And again, that'll determine on whether you're using more ankle, knee or hip or all three. It's really important that when you do this, that it's done on very flat terrain. Moving forward now, we've gotten the sensation of the skis locking on the edge and receiving that energy, and we've also talked a little bit about what angle the skis need to be pointed or what direction they need to be pointed in. So now let's talk a little bit more about the start of the turn and how we get to that point where we lock the skis on the edge. As you'll see here, at the top of any turn, like I said before, the skis have to change the edge. Okay. Once the skis are on the new edge, I then have the option of continuing to edge and allowing the skis to track away from me on the edge to a longer, stronger, straighter leg to deal with the pressure. But that can take a little while depending on the radius of the ski. So if I need to have the turn happen more quickly because of the terrain or my speed or whatever it is that I'm doing, then I'm going to try to pull my feet forward through the arc more quickly than they would carve until I'm at a point or have that angle that I feel ready to then lock the ski on the edge. Okay, and for that I can show you this boot arc. So to do this boot arc, I'm going to start with my skis off, and I'm going to take a step down the hill to give me the same feeling that I've just crossed over the skis. So if I'm taking the step with one foot, the other foot I'm going to leave pointing across the hill, and as I take the step it's going to roll onto the downhill edge just in a similar way to what I've shown you with the skis on. So once I've got the edge, if I continue to edge, the ski's going to travel away from me on an arc, but in certain situations I need my ski to get through the turn more quickly. So for that to happen, a lot of people think that I need to apply a twisting or turning force. But from this edged position, any twisting or turning is not possible because I can't turn the front of the ski into the snow. So what I'm trying to do here is actually pull my foot forward, and I use my hip flexors and quads to do this, and that will pull my foot forward and break the ski off the edge. I really want to try to get the ski to come through the arc more quickly than the arc the ski would take if it was pure carving, and to a place that then I can set my edge if I need to. I think that this idea of turning the ski by moving my foot forward is an interesting point. It's very misunderstood because I think that direction change of the ski is thought of traditionally as a twisting or turning. When you do set the edge, once you've pulled the foot forward, will really depend on a number of different things. You know, if you're wanting more speed control, then the edge set might happen later. If you're wanting more deflection across the hill, it's going to happen earlier. So it really depends on which objective you're going for, whether it's that faster rhythm, whether it's the more deflection, whether it's a faster pace down the hill. And where I set the edge will, I guess, be something that changes every time I do short turns. It's important though that the ski is travelling forward and you're pulling your foot forward toes first. There's a significant difference between that and pushing the heel where the heel travels away from the body first. And that's going to create more of a skid rather than moving through the arc the way I want it to. While this isn't just an exercise you can do while you're skiing, it's good to practice this stationary in the snow, it's good to practice this at home and try to get the feeling of changing edges and pulling your foot forward through until you decide you want to lock the ski on the edge. And then think about the exercises we did with the crab walk to lock the ski on the edge and receive that energy from the snow. So it's something to have in your mind while you're skiing. So the last point I want to talk about, which is what I'm thinking about more through the transition, after I've locked the skis on the edge and the snow starts to push me across the hill, is how long I stay strong for or how much I soften to get into the new turn. And again, it's very difficult for me to say this is how much because it will depend on a lot of things. But the concept that I have is very similar to bouncing on a trampoline. So if you watch here, there's many different ways I can bounce. If I'm going for height, which might be similar to deflection, then as I land on the mat, I'm going to stay as strong as possible until the mat bends and forces me back up into the air. And you'll see here that my height is a lot greater, but the bounce rate is a lot slower. So that's like deflection is greater and the rhythm is slower. If I want to show a faster rhythm, because I feel that the terrain is more exciting for a faster rhythm, then you'll see now when I'm jumping on the trampoline, when the mat bends and throws me up into the air, I'm going to start to soften my legs so that I don't go as high, but it allows me to increase the jump rate. So that would be like softening my leg to absorb some of the pressure, which means my deflection will be less, but it allows me to move into the next turn and create a faster rhythm. Well, you know, this is an interesting exercise because it's not something that you would take on the slopes, but the concept of the timing and the feeling that you have when you receive the energy from the mat is very similar. So I encourage you, if you do have access to a trampoline, to try this, you know, and try to do the different styles of jumping. And you can think about this also when you're out doing short turns. Which transition I choose will depend a lot on the terrain, as I said. So if it's flatter, which doesn't allow for very much deflection, or the snow is softer, I still want to look exciting. So the rhythm will be something I want to increase, and maybe the speed. So that's where I might use a softer transition. When the snow's firmer or it's very steep, so I don't want to be gaining speed, then I'm looking more for deflection. So I might stay stronger against the snow or against the mat of the trampoline, so I have more deflection and energy across the hill. I think short turns should be trained on all different terrain, both groomed, not groomed, steep, flat, and I think if you're going to a specific terrain, there should be a specific focus in mind, but definitely learning a new movement or trying to refine a movement, I'm going to do it on something that I feel comfortable on. If I'm going for a certain objective like more deflection, then that'll be easier to do on steeper terrain. So there's not one type of terrain that I do a short turn on. I think it's a good idea to train all skiing on all types of skis. You know, some people box in a short turn to being a slalom ski and a long turn to being on a GS ski, but I think there are benefits to using the GS ski for short turns and vice versa. Obviously you can't pure carve a short turn on a GS ski, so that teaches good blending of the movements or good timing of when you do connect with the edge. So that's good training, and I think a slalom ski is good, you know, just like it is for long turns, but it facilitates a more pure carve turn. It allows somebody who's working on earlier edging or edge changing to be more confident and move more aggressively. So anyway, I hope these exercises and concepts really help with your short turns. I'm constantly practicing these ideas all the time, and every time I go skiing I'm thinking about what the most exciting short turn will be for myself and also the viewer, and then I'm trying to blend these objectives with the technique I've just gone through to achieve that goal. So good luck, and I hope to see you on the slopes.
Hi, I'm Riley McGlashan, and I'm excited to be presenting a few key ideas that I've been working on over the past few winters since my last video. Definitely my idea of skiing has changed and been developing and shaping itself in a different direction since I'm no longer associated with any organisations. I've been able to pursue my own ideas and concepts of what I've been visualising in my head for at least the last 10 years, and without a specific model or method to adhere to, it's been a really exciting time for my personal development in the direction of my choice, and I hope you guys enjoy. Short turns. So many possibilities come to mind when I think about short turns, and what I think makes a really skillful short turn skier is being able to change the turn shape, the turn size and the performance on any terrain at any speed, any snow conditions, and this is the highest level of short turn to me. And then obviously trying to take this into the off-piste. Along with that, I do think short turns are a lot like a dance, and flow and rhythm are just as important as having great technique. Having a flow of movements is what I like watching in skiers visually, and when a skier may not have the most perfect technique, if they have this type of flow, like a dance, where the movements connect, I often think this can be more important and more visually powerful than the actual technique itself. There is a fine line between having aggressive looking turns and having a flowing like dance turn, and this is something I'm always trying to play with. Having an aggressive style with power is also the goal, but it's a contradiction to a smooth, elegant dance. So trying to combine these two elements is always the objective, and I really find this challenging. Another really important thing I think about a lot are mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes or mistimes things when they're pushing their skiing, and if you're not making mistakes, then you're probably not pushing yourself hard enough. But I really like watching skiers that when they make a mistake, they make the mistake look good, and then the mistake flows back into their skiing. And I think about this a lot, and it's very intriguing for me personally, and making mistakes look good is something I'm always trying to achieve as well. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into a few exercises that have really helped me develop this type of short turn, and I hope it's going to help you with your short turns too.
Turn track training is one of my most often used cues for myself when I'm free skiing. Learning to understand what the tracks are saying about my movements, I think, has been one of the most important things in my short-term ski training, because it gives a great visual roadmap to when and where certain movements happen in the turn. This gives me an idea if I'm on the right track or not, pun intended. While free skiing, many variations of these tracks happen depending on the snow, the steepness, your ski, etc, etc. And when I go out and ski alone, I like to challenge myself to make one certain track down a specific slope. I have 4 specific track types that I try and make, and I'll share with you guys what they are and how to utilize this great external feedback tool. This type of track can be made with any ski on any terrain, from beginner terrain to expert off-piste terrain, and is the basis for all short turns. These tracks are the most common on the hill, but the tracks I try and leave have one slight variation. I still try and start the turn just with the ankles from a lateral edging movement. Often the tail swing happens at the same time, but my personal thought is just edging movements from the start of the turn. Leaving a quarter moon shaped track in the snow is the ideal scenario, with strong edging at the end of the turn to lock the edges into the snow. Dynamic short swings are a ramped up version of the classic short swing. The swing path of the tail is much less, and an increase in speed and edges needed. This is the ideal turn I try and make on my GS skis on steeper terrain, and is definitely a challenge, but can be done on all skis and on all groomed terrain. The shape is a much thinner quarter moon with a definite edge mark to start the turn and to finish the turn. This is the most important part that I look for in the turn shape, which is starting on a locked edge and finishing on a locked edge, with a displacement of the tails of the skis in the middle of the turn. Super dynamic short swing turns are essentially a slalom ski short turn done as dynamically as possible on steep terrain. Speed, edge, and a bit more foot independence is required, and I would love to be able to make this type of turn on a GS ski, but I think the radius requirements make it pretty much impossible. Maybe one day. The tracks are 2 very small new moons. Both skis are cutting tracks, and a mini displacement of the tails in the middle of the turn happens. Once again, starting the turn on the edges and finishing the turn on the edges is extremely important. A carved short turn is a lot of fun, from the speed and dynamics and the flow it has. It is not possible to do this turn on expert terrain nor beginner terrain. Intermediate terrain is the most suitable because a certain amount of speed is required to accomplish it. Beginner terrain you won't get enough speed, and expert terrain you won't be able to control the turns properly from too much speed. So it is pretty much a very limited turn, only suitable for groomed runs. I generally use this turn on intermediate terrain and transitions or rollers in a run when it flattens out and I need to maintain speed to get to the next steeper section. The tracks are two thin edge-lock lines in the snow without any tip or tail displacement. Only bending of the ski leaves a slightly thicker track when the terrain is a little steep with more speed. So these are the 4 types of tracks I like to make and use as external cues for my personal training when I train myself. When free skiing, all these tracks will be utilised and blended depending on the terrain and snow and the skis, so it's an ever-changing variable. These are just good guidelines to hopefully give understanding about what movements are happening in your turns and where they're happening. Now let's go over some exercises specifically targeting the movements I use to create these different turn tracks. Foot pronation is extremely important to me and how I like to make turns, and especially starting the turn. Practicing this movement indoors on soft carpet is something I like to do while working at a computer at home. Having strong, precise ankle movements is essential in making good turns, and strengthening these movements and muscles can be done all year outside of skiing. Standing or sitting, you can practice this movement rolling the foot from side to side. I like to engage the peroneus longus, and this can also be done with bands to increase intensity and strength. This movement needs to directly translate into the ski boot, and if done correctly, then this movement made inside the boot will tip the boots from side to side or edge to edge. If the boot fits correctly, then there should be minimum movement inside the boot. Doing this in boots stationary before skiing is a great warm-up, and focusing on the peroneus muscle to activate and engage is something I like to do as part of my warm-up routine before I ski. I find that practicing this movement outside of ski boots helps and improves this movement when I get into my boots. Another key for doing this in my boots is I like to feel the whole side of my foot or arch pressing against the side of my boot. The next step is taking this muscle activation and using it in a basic edge roll exercise. This is one of my favourite exercises as it can be done all over the mountain, from cat tracks to flat sections and the beginner hill. While free skiing, I like to utilise the flat sections of the mountain in between the steeper sections to practice this. My goal in my personal skiing is to start every turn with this movement, and this includes all my basic turns all the way up to off-piste and moguls. In my mind, always start with this. This exercise of dragging the poles while doing an edge roll and not pole planting is very important, as it keeps my center of mass stable and helps me keep my zipper of my jacket vertical without any excessive inclination or angulation. One tip I remind myself is to try and push and drag the tips of my poles into the snow. This creates muscular tension in the upper body and helps to stabilize it. I also try and keep my pole tips in line with my boots to the side. While the pole drag keeps the upper body stable, the most important factor is activating the foot pronation and supination. This high tuck edge roll is another great variation that I find slightly more challenging and is a good progression from the last drill. The high tuck position gives a good reference to where our upper body is facing. The hands out in front create a point of an arrow, which gives a good external reference to the upper body direction. This high tuck position also creates a slightly more aggressive stance, which is more suited to faster, more dynamic short turns. Taking the poles away and off the snow makes me try and internalize a balanced position. Without the kinesthetic awareness of the poles touching, this forces the upper body to correctly stay in balance. On easy intermediate groom terrain, I then like to add a pole plant while keeping the same ankle movements and body position that was practiced in the previous exercises. This little progression is a typical thing I would personally do to work on my early ankle activation and edging. Skidding movements or steering movements are very tricky. I find there are a lot of systems that teach this as leg rotation. I personally haven't taught leg rotation in my lessons, and for me, technically what I do and teach is very different to traditional leg rotation. Internal rotation of the femur happens in my skiing, but it's a direct result from an edging or tipping movement without a tip or tail displacement. So I call this edging because it directly tips the ski onto its edge, which is what we worked on in the last section. The steering angle or tip and tail displacement, which most people think is leg rotation, I think happens from a forward-backward movement of the leg or a segment of the leg, and it can be coupled with abduction of the leg, not a direct twisting of the femur. As a warm-up, I like practicing a forward-backward movement of the leg. Once the skis are tipped on edge, this is the movement I do to skid or create a steering angle. Depending on the size of the turn I want to make, and also the type of ski, will depend on how much of each segment of the leg I will use. A forward-backward movement of the whole leg will create a longer short turn and is better for a slalom ski, where using just the lower leg can be great for very fast tight steering angle and more suited towards a longer radius ski. I like using mostly the lower leg to do this, but there will always be a combination of the two. I'm more talking about where the majority of the movement comes from. This single leg skid exercise I like practicing as it gives a good sensation of what the snow should feel like under your ski, but it also gives a good reference to how far your skis can travel away from you, and it also gives a good sense of the size of the turn. I have 3 variations of this. Using the same forward-backward movements from the last exercise, you also need to combine a little abduction of the leg as well. When starting the skid, the balance needs to be on the front of the foot and the skis, which is why I have the poles for balance on the downhill side of me. This allows me to be more forward on the skis and gives a pivot point to move around. Another reason is when we're on the tips of the skis with a little bit of edge angle, the wider tip digs in first and also creates a pivot point where the tails can swing out and around. At the end of the turn, to finish this exercise, the edges need to be strongly set into the snow to stop the skidding movement. To start this strong edging, I like to use the foot pronation like in the earlier section, combined with the foot travelling further away from the centre of mass, which also increases the edge angle. This is really important and is something that needs to happen in a good short turn for good rebound. The next step is to take this exercise and put both skis on and give it a go. Once the single leg is mastered on both sides, the same movement applies, but with both skis on it is a little trickier. I like to lift up the inside ski in certain snow conditions to make the outside ski slide better. You can do it with both skis on the snow, but it will depend on the snow conditions. This next one is a lot of fun and a great challenge. We are building new movements one by one, and now we are adding a transition. From edge skis to swing, back to edge skis, and then flatten and change sides. I like staying in a lower position as I change edges from turn to turn, as this gives me a good sensation of what I will be doing in my own free skiing. Be careful on very soft snow as the poles will dig down and fall away. A key focus while connecting turns is the fore-aft balance. I am feeling the front of my skis at the start of the turn and the balls of my feet, and at the end of the turn I am more on the back of the arch and my heel. Then moving my poles down the hill from me emulates the toppling effect you would have in a turn, and therefore putting my weight forward on my feet again. And then I have to catch up with my feet by moving the leg and foot forward through the turn. This next exercise is a combination of a few different elements. The pole drag is to maintain roughly the same height off the snow. I'm trying to make sure my centre of mass doesn't rise. I'm also trying to make sure that I'm using the pronation movements from the first set of exercises to land and balance on the edges. If you skid a little, it's no problem. The most important thing is to finish on your edges, cleanly cutting into the snow. The new element or movement being added now is the hamstring engagement. The tails of the skis lift off the snow from pulling the feet back and the heels up towards your bum. This is the most important part for me as it starts the turn and makes the tails light and digs the tips in. This is very useful for me on steep terrain and allows the tails and the legs to swing better because there is less resistance. Using a mini style hanger is something I utilise all the time while free skiing. Like I explained in the last exercise, this helps lighten the tails to allow the legs to swing better. Practicing a mini style hanger often can look just like normal skiing. I'm trying just to lift the tails about 1 centimetre off the snow. Sometimes it's more and sometimes it's less, but it should only be just enough to make the tails light.
I really hope you enjoyed learning some of these short turn exercises. They've helped my skiing a lot and I'm sure they will with yours. Enjoy!
Hello, my name is Richard Berger. I'm from Austria. I'm traveling around the world with skiing. I'm happy to be able to follow my passion for a very, very long time. I used to work for more than 10 years in the Bundessportheim in St. Christoph. I also used to work more than 20 years for the Austrian Ski Association. And I ski a lot in Japan, I skied in Argentina, I skied in New Zealand, Australia. All these places I was able to work, I was able to ski with different people around the world, and I was able to introduce them my opinion of skiing, my thoughts of skiing, my passion of skiing, and that's what I'm still doing. I ski for more than 40-45 years, and in this time my skiing has been changing a lot, but not just my technique, also the material changed a lot. Like 30 years ago we skied with very long straight skis, and now we have carving skis and very short skis. Just the material was challenging us to change the technique. I mean, my skiing is different year by year, and if I watch my skiing from earlier, I don't like to watch my older videos. So I try to keep watching forward. I try to keep moving forward. I try to get still better and better, and to change my technique, to improve my technique. Of course, inspiring is always racing, but also the Japanese technical skiers are always a big inspiration for my own skiing. But also my thoughts are very important. I have a different kind of thinking about how I want to ski, how I want to change my skiing, how I want to improve my skiing. And this combination of these three things, racing, demo skiing, and my thoughts, that's the goal, that's the focus, how I try to change and how I try to get better. The highest performance on skiing is short turn, actually. Unfortunately, you can't see many people anymore short turn skiing because it's also the most difficult. What I like on short turns is actually the response, the rebound. If you ski long turns, you never get this response and rebound from the terrain, from the snow, from your skis, than on short turns. And also the challenging of balance is much higher on short turns, and that's why I love to ski short turns, actually, because I love to challenge myself, and this gives me satisfaction. It gives me motivation if it wasn't good to practice, to train it more, to do another run, and it gives me satisfaction when I had a good run. When it looks easy, you know that the snow is difficult, you know that the terrain is very steep, and the skier is still able to show a very easy skiing. And those skier I like to watch, and that's also the point I'm looking for, to show easy skiing in any situation, in any conditions. Exercising is very important. I also love to exercise. I love to practice, I love to train, and I love to develop new exercises. But like I said, when I ski by myself, when I go skiing, when I want to enjoy skiing, when I want to show my best skiing, there is no thought about the technique, but that you are able to show your best technique, that you are able to show all what you have been practicing, that you are able to show all what you have been exercising. You have to automate all these things, and then you're able to move how it's necessary in a certain situation, in a certain snow, in a certain speed. And that's why we're actually exercising. Also I introduce people to ski with up and down motion, or I introduce them with skiing with pole blend or without pole blend. And in the situation you have to feel what you have to do. Do you need much pole blend, or is it not necessary? Do you need to move up and down, or is it not necessary? So you shouldn't try to ski a certain technical way when you go skiing. You should try to be in a stable position, in a balanced position. The biggest focus has to be to stay in this position, and therefore we are moving, but all these movements are actually, for me, more recovering movements and no acting movements. And that's the way, I mean, you're able to ski any situations in a very easy way. Now you can see some exercises how your short turn could become better. These are one of my favorites. Probably you have never seen some of them. But I mean, with those, you're really able to improve and to make one step higher in your short turns. Okay, the first exercise I want to introduce you is the stem twisty turn. All of you know probably stem twisty turns, but this stem twisty turn is different because it's in a very short rhythm. And in this short rhythm I am focusing on moving my legs, which is a very important point on short turns. And by moving your legs you also separate your upper body from your lower body, and that's what we need in short turns. We stabilize our upper body, we move our legs outside, and that's a very basic movement, and the stem twisty turn is a very basic exercise for short turns. The focus on this stem twisty turn has to be on a stable upper body, moving your legs. It doesn't matter if you move up and down or if you lift up your legs, all these are not the questions. The only question is to stabilize your upper body and to move your legs as fast as possible in combination with pole planting. A good feedback for yourself when you practice this by yourself could be that you feel your upper body nice faced into the fall line, that your upper body is not turning, that just your legs and your skis are turning out of the fall line. Then it's also very easy to coordinate the pole plant, and that could be a good help for you if you practice for yourself these exercises to swing your legs out, but it's alternately, just one and then the other one, so it's much easier to stay in balance, because for a short moment you have a snowplow position and then you just match the skis, and for a very short time the skis are parallel. So that's why it makes it much easier to go in a short rhythm. Also for people who starts to do short turns actually. Because to move both legs so quickly is much harder. Also to control the speed. And by this way you separate and you're in a stable position because you're in a snowplow position, and then you just match for a short time. And if you do it just quick. The second exercise is a leg swing. It's just a progression from the stem twisty turn. Also in the stem twisty turn you mainly move your tails out, and that's what you do also in your leg swing. In the leg swing is not a nice steered turn, it's more with your tails. It's pretty slided turn with flat edges. And the point is also to stabilize your upper body, to swing mainly your legs, to bring your skis nice across the fall line, to control the speed. But on this exercise now with both skis at the same time in a parallel position, and before we did it just alternately with one and then the other ski. In all these exercises, also in stem turn and this basic parallel skidded short turn, it's very important that you edge at the end of the turn. If you don't finish the turn on the edge, it's very hard to initiate the next turn. It's very hard to do the next step. It's very hard to match the skis. You're just able to push off from your skis if they are edged. So in my teaching method, I always like to finish the turn on the edges, even on snowplow turns. As well on stem twisty turns. The edging at the end of the turn is very important to be able to do the next step. One help that you are doing it right could be that you focus on a very narrow corridor. If you're moving in a too big corridor, if you're moving too far left, too far right, then probably you're turning too much the whole body. Just if you keep your upper body stable and if you swing your legs, you're able to stay in a very narrow corridor pretty close to the fall line, and that means that you're doing right this exercise. third exercise is a combination of turning and traversing, actually. Yeah, on this point we focus more on edging of the skis. Until now I was more focusing on the swing of the ski, and now I start to focus more on the edging at the end of the turn. And this edging is actually very important because this also gives you a nice shape in your short turns, or a better shape in your short turns. Your turns will become rounder. Yeah, if you use this side cut at the end of the turn, if you use the side cut, you start to glide more along the edges, and this also gives you more shape, and that's what we are focusing on this exercise. On this exercise, actually I focus that the point where you start edging is in the right timing with building up your alpine basic position. Yeah, you shouldn't slide and swing with alpine basic position. If you swing your legs, if you swing your skis, you're in a pretty neutral position, and once you build up your alpine basic position, you also should build up your edge angle, and that's why you start to ski along the side cut. A very important point on this exercise is that you start to angulate when you start edging. Yeah, don't angulate and keep sliding with your skis. In the moment you start angulating, yeah, that's also the moment where you have to keep edge pressure, where you have to control edge pressure, and where your ski should start to glide along the edges sideward. The alpine basic position is an angulated position, which we use to control the speed and to guide the ski once you are moving out of the fall line. It's a very important point to stay in balance and to lead or to guide pressures and forces out of the fall line. Yeah, exercise number 4 is a quick short edge swing with which you take a seat in the snow. It's actually a very funny exercise, and I started to do this exercise because I felt people get more confident with this exercise, because of course we are not falling, we are not crashing, we take a seat, but even if we are sitting in the snow, you should still have the feeling I'm controlled. And therefore it's so important that you're not supporting on your stocks, that you're not supporting on your arms, that your arms are always nice up in the air, and that you do it really with your legs. And if you swing and extend your legs, then also the touch with your hip in the snow is pretty soft, it doesn't hurt. Yeah, it shouldn't be a crash, it shouldn't be a fall, it shouldn't hurt in your hip. Important is that you extend your legs. That's a very important point, that your outside leg is extended. You shouldn't bend. Yeah, you should extend your outside leg, and then the hip touch is very soft, and when you keep your upper body upright, also your arms are up in the air, and then this fall or this crash is very controlled, and it gives you confidence that even when you sit in the snow, you are still in a controlled position. But if you extend your leg, you can feel how strong you are, and then you also feel that it's much easier to control this pressure and to stay in balance, even if we are sitting in the snow, even if we are falling into the snow. The most people are struggling in the rhythm. The most people are having problems in keeping the rhythm, in controlling the speed, and that's why I'm doing first these exercises. And early edging is also in combination with more speed. I mean, the swing and edging exercise is already one step for earlier edging, actually. And also the last exercise, sitting in the snow, is also an exercise to get closer to earlier edging, because if you do this then while skiing, yeah, by moving your hip so far inside, you get much earlier edge angle. sure you will have fun with these exercises, and I'm also confident that your skiing became much better on short turns when you practice these exercises several times. Yeah, enjoy and have fun.
You want to say a few more words?
No.
No? Okay.
1, 2.